What's the saddest thing you were paid to do that left you questioning everything in the end? I was scrolling through Craigslist looking for odd jobs when I found the weirdest post I'd ever seen. Cry at my funeral for $200. It had to be a joke, but in my experience, it was always the weird posts that got me paid, so I sent out a text and scheduled a meetup. Well, it wasn't a joke. The lady, Elaine, slid a $100 bill across the table, rolled up the same way sketchy dealers do it, and smiled. That's your deposit. The other 100 comes after you ugly cry at my funeral in about 6 weeks. I sat there still completely lost. Elaine was still in her 30s and honestly really healthy looking, if not a little exhausted around the eyes. Your funeral in 6 weeks? I asked. She nodded. Yes, the doctors gave me between 4 to 6 weeks before pancreatic cancer cuts my life short. I know it sounds morbid, but I have no family left to mourn me. And my friends are too shallow to care. I just want to go out knowing at least one person is willing to cry for me when I'm gone. I couldn't say no. I felt terrible. I can cry. I'm really good at crying, I reassured her. Elaine giggled at my enthusiasm. You can't just show up and cry about nothing, she said. You need to know me, have specific memories to sob about. So for a few hours this weekend, I'd meet her and just hang out, taking pictures and videos together like we'd been friends for years. This is me at camp, she said, pointing to a scrawny kid with braces. My parents put me here hoping I'd learn to swim, but it only made me more terrified of the water. She handed me more stacks of old photo albums, introduced me to each person like I was an open diary, and it was weirdly peaceful getting to hear her life story. She pulled out a dusty binder at the next hangout and grinned. This is my literal bucket list. The first few pages were filled with adventures I never would have expected from her. Cave exploration, deep sea diving, pictures in front of the Egyptian pyramid. You're amazing, I told her. She gave a sad smile. Kinda sad that all those adventures end here. Anyway, let's not wallow in sadness. I have something you need to learn from me. She pulled out her phone and opened up Spotify. This is for the funeral playlist. My best friend in the whole world should at least know my favorite songs. She grinned at me. She placed her camera on and held out her hand when Endless Love started playing. Let's dance. We swayed in her tiny apartment, her head against my chest. The smell of her cinnamon shampoo filled my head. Can I tell you something? She asked softly. I act all happy like this, but I'm terrified. She buried her face in my shirt, tears staining it lightly. For what it's worth, I think you're brave. And I'm glad I can call you a friend, I whispered back, and I meant it. We spent the next few weekends trying to fill up a small photo album, going to restaurants, local concerts, and events together. Things that I never really cared about just felt so right when it was done with her. But she was getting weaker, losing weight, moving slower, wincing whenever she thought I wasn't looking. Our hangouts moved from her living room to her bedroom, just sitting there by her bed watching movies with her head on my shoulder, talking and taking pictures together for the funeral before she needed to rest again. It was heartbreaking watching someone so full of life slowly lose it all. One night, after a particularly bad day, she turned to me and said, I wish we'd met in my healthy years. We could have had something real. When I leaned in to kiss her, she turned her face. Please, don't fall for a dying woman, she whispered. It's the worst investment you'll ever make. And it'll only make me feel even more helpless. I should have done it anyway. That next morning, I received a call from her lawyer informing me that Elaine had passed in her sleep with the funeral set in 2 days. I thought I was ready, but the news of her passing hurt more than anything I'd ever experienced. I showed up at the funeral home in my only suit. The funeral director handed me a program with one of our selfies on the cover. Elaine had listed me as her dearest friend in the obituary. The tears that came were real. I sobbed through the entire eulogy, talking about all her adventures, the dancing, the other memories we'd made. But I shouldn't have cried for her, because months later inside one of the restaurants she loved, I spotted her in the corner of the room. I wasn't even sure if it was her at first. She was blonde now instead of brunette, healthy instead of sick. But from her sweet laughter and charming smile, I knew it was her. Our eyes met across the room. My fork stops halfway to my mouth and clatters back onto the plate. She looks away fast, but I already saw the panic flash across her face. My hands start shaking, so I grip the edge of the table to steady myself. She's blonde now instead of brown, wearing a nice dress that probably cost more than my rent, laughing with some guy in a suit like she doesn't have a care in the world. But I know that laugh. I know the way she tilts her head when she smiles. That's Elaine. The same Elaine who died 3 months ago. The same Elaine I cried over at her funeral. I remember the first time I met her, sitting in that coffee shop 6 weeks before everything went wrong. She slid a rolled-up $100 bill across the table between us and smiled like we were making some kind of drug deal. She told me she had maybe 4 to 6 weeks left because pancreatic cancer was eating her alive. She said she had no family, no real friends, nobody who would cry when she was gone. I felt so bad for her that I took the job without even thinking twice about how weird it was. She made me promise to really cry, to make it look real, and she said I needed to know her story first, so I'd have actual memories to be sad about. So we spent weekends together after that. She showed me thick photo albums with pictures of her as a kid at summer camp. told me about how her parents wanted her to learn swimming, but the water scared her too much. She pulled out this old binder with her bucket list inside, and I got to see all the amazing things she'd done. Cave trips and ocean dives and standing in front of pyramids in Egypt. I told her she was amazing, and she just gave me this sad smile like none of it mattered anymore. Then she played music on her phone and asked me to dance with her right there in her tiny apartment. We swayed together while some old love song played, and she put her head against my chest. Her hair smelled like cinnamon. She told me she was scared even though she acted happy. She cried a little, and I felt the tears soak through my shirt. I told her I was glad to call her a friend, and I meant every word. We went to restaurants and concerts together over the next few weeks. We took so many pictures for the funeral slideshow, but she started getting weaker. She lost weight. She moved slower. She'd wince when she thought I wasn't watching. Pretty soon our hangouts moved from her couch to her bedroom because she was too tired to do much else. We'd just watch movies with her head on my shoulder and take more pictures before she needed to rest. One night she told me she wished we'd met when she was healthy. She said we could have had something real. I tried to kiss her, but she turned away. She told me not to fall for a dying woman because it was the worst choice I could make, and it would just make her feel worse. The next morning I got a call from someone who said they were her lawyer. The voice told me Elaine had died in her sleep. The funeral was in 2 days. I couldn't believe it. The news hurt worse than anything I'd felt before. I showed up to the funeral home wearing my only suit. The funeral guy handed me a program with one of our selfies printed on the cover. The obituary listed me as her dearest friend. I cried real tears during the whole thing. I gave this eulogy talking about her adventures and the dancing and all our memories together. I thought I was doing something good for someone who died alone and scared. But now I'm staring at her across this restaurant 3 months later. She's healthy and blonde and wearing expensive clothes. She's laughing like nothing ever happened. When she looks my way again, I push my chair back and stand up. My legs feel shaky, but I start walking toward her table anyway. I need answers. I need to know what the hell is going on. She sees me coming and her whole face goes white. She grabs her purse fast and says something quick to the guy sitting with her. Then she's up and moving toward the back of the restaurant. I push past other people eating their dinners, trying to keep up with her. Someone yells at me for bumping their table, but I don't care. By the time I get to the back exit and push through the door into the alley, she's already gone. I stand there in the dark alley behind the restaurant. My heart is pounding, so hard I can hear it in my ears. My hands won't stop shaking. I'm confused and mad, and I don't know what to think. Back at my apartment that night, I pull out the memorial program from my desk drawer. I stare at our photo on the cover. We look so happy in that picture. I open my phone and scroll through all our old text messages. She thanked me for being willing to cry for her. She called me a good friend. She said she was grateful we met. Every single word feels like a lie now. I can't sleep, so I start going through everything trying to find clues I missed before. The lawyer who called never told me their name. I never got a callback number. The funeral home did everything, but I never actually saw a death certificate. When I tried to visit her apartment after the funeral to pick up some photos she'd promised me, the manager said the lease was under a different name. None of it makes sense. By the time morning light starts coming through my window, I've made up my mind. I need to find out the truth, but I'm not going to do anything stupid like confront her alone. I grab a notebook and start writing down concrete steps I can take. Contact the funeral home and ask questions. Check the vital records office for a death certificate. Talk to the police about what happened. Try to find out if anyone else got paid to show up at that memorial service. I make the list nice and clear so I know exactly what to do next. The next morning, I pull out my phone and search for the funeral home's number in my call history. My finger hovers over the screen for a second before I press dial. A woman answers, and I ask to speak with whoever handled the memorial service for Elaine 3 months ago. She puts me on hold and soft piano music plays in my ear. After about 2 minutes, a man picks up and introduces himself as Alan Bellamy. I tell him my name and explain that I attended the service, that I was listed as a close friend in the program. Then I tell him I saw Elaine alive at a restaurant last week. The line goes quiet for so long I think the call dropped. When Alan finally speaks, his voice sounds strained and uncomfortable. He says he needs to pull the file and asks me to hold again. When he comes back, he admits something that makes my stomach drop. It was technically a memorial service, not a funeral, because there were never any remains. No body, no ashes, nothing. Alan sounds embarrassed as he explains that someone paid in cash for the venue rental, the programs, and basic coordination. The paperwork was minimal because no actual burial or cremation was involved. He says memorial services without remains aren't uncommon when families want to honor someone who donated their body to science or was cremated privately. I ask if he can check what name was on the payment paperwork. He puts me on hold again, and I can hear papers rustling in the background. When he returns, he says the contract was signed by someone using just a first initial and last name, paid entirely in cash with no credit card or check trail. He promises to call me back with more details after he reviews everything properly. Next, I drive to the Vital Records office downtown and park in the lot behind the building. Inside, fluorescent lights buzz overhead, and a clerk sits behind a counter organizing files. I approach and ask her to search for a death certificate under Elaine's full name. She types slowly on her computer, her fingers pecking at the keyboard one key at a time. After several minutes, she shakes her head and says there's nothing in the system. I feel my chest tighten as she explains that processing can take a few weeks sometimes, but 3 months should have been more than enough time for any real death to show up in the records. She asks if I have the date of death, and I give her the exact day the lawyer called me. She searches again using the date, but still finds nothing. She suggests that maybe the death occurred in a different county or state, but her tone makes it clear she thinks something doesn't add up either. From there, I drive straight to the police station and walk up to the front desk. The officer on duty looks bored until I say, I need to file a report about possible fraud. He pulls out a form and clicks his pen, suddenly more interested. I start from the beginning with the Craigslist ad offering $200 to cry at a funeral. His eyebrows go up, but he keeps writing. I explain the weeks of building a fake friendship, the stories about terminal cancer, the memorial service where I gave a real eulogy. Then I tell him about seeing her alive and healthy at the restaurant. He stops writing and looks at me for a long moment before asking if I have any proof. I pull out my phone and show him the old text messages, the memorial program, and photos we took together. He takes notes on everything and says someone from the Financial Crimes Unit will contact me. He warns me that these cases can be tricky to prove and asks if I lost anything besides the $200. I tell him it's not really about the money. 2 days later, my phone rings with a number I don't recognize. A woman introduces herself as Detective Maeve Donnelly from Financial Crimes. Her voice is professional but not cold, and she asks if I can come to the station for an interview. I agree, and an hour later I'm sitting in a small room with her across a table. She's maybe in her 40s with dark hair pulled back, and she takes her time listening as I walk through the whole story again. I show her the texts, the program with our selfie on the cover, and more photos from our time together. She asks detailed questions about the payment method, the timeline, and whether I ever met anyone else connected to Elaine. When I mention the lawyer who called about her death, she asks if I have a number or name. I shake my head and admit I never got either. Detective Donnelly leans back in her chair and says this could potentially be theft by deception if Elaine took money under false circumstances. She explains that proving fraud requires showing intent to deceive and that someone suffered harm. She asks if I'm willing to cooperate with an investigation, and I say yes immediately. Detective Donnelly suggests I post carefully worded messages in local groups, asking if anyone else attended the memorial service. I feel nervous about going public with this, but she explains that finding other victims would make the case much stronger. She helps me write a vague post that asks about the service without using Elaine's full name or making accusations. That evening, I sit on my couch staring at the draft message on my phone. Finally, I post it to 3 different community groups and then close the app because I can't stand watching for responses. Within hours, someone named Elias LeBlanc sends me a private message. He says he was paid $200 to pose as Elaine's cousin at the memorial. His message sounds angry and embarrassed at the same time. He asks if we can meet to compare notes and says he's been feeling sick about the whole thing since it happened. I screenshot his message and forward it to Detective Donnelly before I respond. She texts back quickly telling me to meet him in a public place and let her know when and where. I message Elias back and we agree to meet at a coffee shop the next afternoon. The next day, I arrive at the coffee shop 15 minutes early and grab a table near the window. When Elias walks in, I recognize him immediately from the service. He's tall with glasses and he spots me right away too. We shake hands awkwardly and he sits down across from me. He pulls out his phone without saying much and shows me text messages that look almost exactly like mine. Same instructions about crying convincingly, same rolled up $100 bill as a deposit, same promise of another $100 after the service. He mentions that someone named Reese handled most of the logistics and payments. I write down the name and text it to Detective Donnelly while Elias orders coffee. We spend the next hour piecing together everything we know. Neither of us ever met Elaine's supposed lawyer, and we both just got phone calls with no callback number. The funeral home seemed real enough, but everything was minimal and rushed. We were both told we'd get the second $100 mailed to us after we cried convincingly at the service. Elias admits he felt genuine grief during the memorial because Elaine's story about dying alone was so sad. He says he actually cried real tears thinking about how lonely she must have been. I tell him I did the same thing, and we sit there for a minute not saying anything. Before we leave, I take his number and promise to keep him updated about what Detective Donnelly finds. That night, back at my apartment, I pull out the memorial program again and study it under my desk lamp. I'm looking for anything I missed before, any small detail that might help. That's when I notice a tiny imprint code in the bottom corner of the back page. It's so small I almost need a magnifying glass to read it. The code includes what looks like a printer identifier and a location marker. I grab my phone and take several close-up photos of the code, making sure the numbers are clear. I create a new folder on my phone labeled Evidence and add the photos along with everything else I've collected. Then I text Detective Donnelly about the print shop code, and she responds that she'll look into it first thing in the morning. The next morning, I drive across town to the address printed on the tiny code at the bottom of the memorial program. The print shop sits between a dry cleaner and a tax office in a strip mall that's seen better days. Inside, the smell of ink and paper fills the small space. A man in his 50s looks up from behind the counter where he's sorting through order forms. I pull out my copy of the program and slide it across to him. He picks it up and studies the cover photo of me and Elaine together. I ask if he remembers printing these. Norman adjusts his glasses and nods slowly. He says someone came in about 3 months ago and paid cash for rush service on 200 copies. The order was picked up the day before the memorial. I feel my pulse quicken as I ask who placed the order. Norman walks over to a filing cabinet and pulls out a work order slip. He runs his finger down the page and stops at a name written in blue ink. Reese is what he tells me. A woman named Reese Barnett handled everything. I take a photo of the work order with my phone and thank him for the information. Norman mentions that his store has a security camera covering the counter area. He keeps the footage for about 6 months in case there are disputes about orders. I ask if he'd be willing to share that recording with the police. He says he'll cooperate fully with any official request and writes down the exact date and time Reese came in to pick up the programs. I leave the shop and sit in my car for a few minutes processing what I learned. Another name to add to the puzzle. I text the information to Detective Donnelly along with the photo of the work order. My phone rings 2 hours later while I'm making lunch in my apartment. Detective Donnelly tells me she ran a search through the state attorney database looking for anyone named Reese Barnett. Nothing came up in the legal system, but she found something else. There's a notary and event coordinator by that name who runs a small business handling memorial services and celebration of life ceremonies. The business has been operating for about 5 years with no complaints or legal issues on record. Detective Donnelly says she's going to request the print shop footage through official channels now that we have a specific date and suspect name. She reminds me that building a solid case takes time and proper procedures. I tell her I understand, but privately I'm feeling impatient. Every day that passes feels like Elaine and Reese could disappear or find new victims. After we hang up, I sit on my couch and think about what comes next. The urge to drive back to that restaurant and confront Elaine directly is strong. I want to walk up to her table and demand answers about why she did this, but I know that would be stupid and could mess up the investigation. I call Detective Donnelly back and tell her I won't try to contact Elaine or Reese on my own. I promise I won't go back to that restaurant alone or do anything that could compromise the case. She sounds relieved and says she appreciates my cooperation. The investigation needs to follow proper legal procedures, even though I want faster results. She mentions that my safety matters too, since we don't know how Elaine might react if she feels cornered. I agree to stay away and let the professionals handle it from here. A week crawls by with no updates. I try to focus on other things, but my mind keeps circling back to Elaine's face across that restaurant, and how healthy she looked. Finally, I decide to go back to the restaurant during lunch when it's busy, and less likely Elaine will be there. I just want to talk to the manager and see if they can provide any useful information. The lunch crowd is thick when I walk in, and I have to wait a few minutes before someone can help me. A woman with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail approaches and introduces herself as Kaylee Osborne. I explain that I'm working with the police on a fraud case, and the woman I saw here might be connected to it. Kaylee listens carefully as I describe Elaine and show her a photo from the memorial program. Her expression shifts to recognition. She confirms that a blonde woman matching that description comes in regularly. Kaylee says she usually shows up on Thursday evenings and sits at the same corner table. I write down the information and thank her for her help. Kaylee leans against the hostess stand and tells me she can't share security footage without a legal request from the police, but she's willing to cooperate fully if they reach out officially. She grabs a notepad and writes down the woman's usual schedule, along with details about her typical orders and behavior. Then Kaylee mentions something that makes my stomach tighten. The blonde woman sometimes meets with another woman who could be Reese based on my description. They sit together for hours talking in low voices and looking at papers spread across the table. Kaylee hands me the notes and says she hopes it helps with the investigation. I leave the restaurant feeling like the pieces are starting to connect, but also aware of how much we still don't know. 3 days later, Detective Donnelly calls to say she got the subpoena for both the restaurant footage and the print shop recording. The legal process moved faster than expected because the print shop owner was so cooperative and the restaurant manager confirmed regular suspicious meetings. But she warns me that reviewing all the footage and building a solid case will take time. I need to be patient and trust the process. I tell her I'll wait, but inside I'm struggling with anger and shame. I keep thinking about how completely I believed Elaine's story, how I sat by her bed watching movies and thought I was helping someone face death with dignity, how I cried real tears at that memorial service while she was probably planning her next con. Detective Donnelly must hear something in my voice because she reminds me that being compassionate isn't a weakness. Elaine exploited that quality, but it doesn't make me stupid for having it. That night I pull out a blank notebook and start writing everything down. Not for the investigation, but for myself. I need to process how someone could fake terminal illness and manipulate people's compassion so deliberately. I write about meeting Elaine at the coffee shop and how she slid that first $100 bill across the table. I describe the photo albums and her stories about summer camp and being afraid of water. I write about dancing to that song in her apartment with her head against my chest and the smell of cinnamon shampoo. I write about her tears soaking into my shirt when she said she was scared. Every memory feels tainted now, but I force myself to record them anyway. The betrayal cuts deeper than losing $200. She took something more valuable, my trust and genuine grief. I write until my hand cramps, and then I close the notebook and put it in my desk drawer. 2 weeks pass with no major updates from Detective Donnelly. She's reviewing footage and building the case file, but these things move slowly through official channels. I try to stay busy with other odd jobs from Craigslist, being more careful now about which posts I respond to. On a Thursday evening, I find myself walking past the restaurant around the time Kaylee mentioned Elaine usually shows up. I tell myself I'm just passing through the area, but I know that's not true. I slow down as I approach the windows and glance inside. My heart jumps when I spot her sitting at that corner table. She's wearing a blue sweater, and her blonde hair catches the light from the overhead fixtures. My hands shake as I pull out my phone and start recording a short video through the window. I'm trying to keep the camera steady and get a clear shot of her face when she suddenly looks up and sees me. Her expression goes from relaxed to shocked in an instant. Her face drains of color, and she stands up so fast her chair scrapes loudly across the floor. She grabs her purse and rushes toward the side exit without even looking back at whoever she was sitting with. I push through the restaurant's front door and run toward the side exit, but she's already outside by the time I get there. The parking lot is poorly lit, and I scan the rows of cars looking for movement. I spot her running between vehicles about 30 yards away. I follow her, but she reaches a dark sedan and jumps inside. The engine starts immediately, and she pulls out of the parking space with her tires squealing slightly. I keep recording as her car speeds toward the exit. I got about 15 seconds of clear footage showing her face and her panicked reaction to seeing me. The video quality isn't great because my hands were shaking, but her features are visible and her fear is obvious. I stand in the parking lot watching her taillights disappear down the street. My chest feels tight with a mix of anger and something else I can't quite name. I walk back to my car and sit in the driver's seat for several minutes before opening my phone. I send the video file to Detective Donnelly with a message explaining what happened. Then I sit there feeling empty and angry and wondering how many other people Elaine has done this to. Detective Donnelly calls me back the next morning and tells me the video was exactly what she needed to push the restaurant footage request through faster channels. She sounds more energized than usual and says she'll have results within a few days instead of weeks. I spend those days checking my phone constantly and trying to focus on normal things like grocery shopping and laundry, but my mind keeps drifting back to Elaine's face in that parking lot. When Detective Donnelly finally calls again, she asks me to come down to the station to review what they found. I drive over immediately, and she leads me to a small conference room with a laptop set up on the table. She clicks through several video clips showing Elaine and Reese sitting together at that same corner table over multiple visits. In one clip, Reese slides a thick envelope across the table, and Elaine tucks it into her purse without opening it. Detective Donnelly pauses the video and looks at me. She explains that the case file is now officially open as a fraud investigation, and they're building a timeline of Elaine's activities over the past 6 months. I watch the footage again and feel this weird mix of anger and something else I can't quite name. Detective Donnelly suggests we go through what I know about Elaine's supposed illness to document all the red flags I missed. We sit there for over an hour while I describe how she claimed to have late-stage cancer, but was walking around normally, eating full meals at restaurants, never losing her hair, or showing any real signs of being sick. Detective Donnelly takes notes and points out that nothing I'm describing matches actual cancer progression. Real patients in late stages would be in constant pain, unable to keep food down, needing serious medical support. The whole thing was just an act designed to make me feel sorry for her and get emotionally invested in her fake story. I feel stupid for not questioning any of it at the time, but Detective Donnelly reminds me that con artists are professionals at manipulation. That night back at my apartment, I pull out my laptop and start going through all the photos Elaine showed me from her bucket list. I do reverse image searches on the travel pictures, and my stomach drops when several come back as stock images from travel websites. The cave exploration photo appears on a tourism site for New Mexico. The pyramid picture shows up on 3 different travel blogs. Some of the photos do seem genuine and personal, but she mixed real fragments of her life with complete lies to build a more believable fake identity. I save screenshots of all the stock images and their source websites, then email everything to Detective Donnelly. Around midnight, I'm scrolling through social media when I find the video someone posted of my eulogy from the memorial service. I hesitate before clicking play, but I force myself to watch it. Seeing myself up there sobbing about Elaine's bravery and adventures makes me feel sick with shame. I talked about how strong she was facing death, cried real tears about losing a friend, described memories we made together like they meant something. She was probably sitting somewhere watching this video and laughing at how well her plan worked. I wonder how many other people she's pulled this same trick on. How many other eulogies exist somewhere with people crying over her fake deaths? The thought makes me so angry I have to close my laptop and walk away from it. Detective Donnelly calls 2 days later with an update about potential charges. She explains that prosecutors are looking at theft by deception and scheme to defraud, but they want to establish a pattern of behavior across multiple victims to build a stronger case. She's working to find other people who might have been targeted through similar posts or memorial services. I ask what happens if she can't find other victims, and Detective Donnelly says my case alone might be enough. but having multiple victims would make prosecution much easier. She tells me to be patient because these investigations take time. Alan from the funeral home calls me that afternoon and says he went through the file more carefully after our last conversation. He found receipts for prepaid cards that were used to pay for various services, and the contact number on those receipts matches the number Reese used when she contacted the print shop about the memorial programs. Alan sounds genuinely sorry about the whole situation and mentions his business is implementing better verification procedures for memorial services going forward. I thank him for looking into it and add the prepaid card information to my growing evidence file. Over the next week, I find myself driving past that coffee shop where I first spotted Elaine and Reese together. On the third day, I see them through the window sitting at a table near the back. I park down the street and grab my phone, then walk casually past the shop while holding my phone up like I'm texting. I snap several photos through the window showing them together, their faces clearly visible. They're leaning close and talking intensely about something. I note the time and location in my phone before walking back to my car. Detective Donnelly says this kind of documentation is helpful as long as I stay safe and don't engage directly with them. She reminds me that I'm a witness and victim, not an investigator, but she appreciates having the additional evidence. My phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number 3 days later. The message just says, "I'm sorry." I stare at those 2 words for several minutes trying to figure out if it's really from Elaine or some random wrong number. The area code matches the one she used before. I forward the text to Detective Donnelly immediately, and she calls me back within 10 minutes. She tells me not to respond yet because she wants to coordinate with the prosecutor's office about the best approach. I sit there holding my phone and feeling this pull to text back and demand answers. After about an hour, I can't take it anymore, and I send a reply asking if we can meet somewhere public. The response comes back almost immediately with just one word, "Okay." I text Detective Donnelly to let her know what I did, and she's not thrilled, but she understands. 2 days later, I'm sitting on a park bench near the downtown library, waiting to see if Elaine will actually show up. My hands are shaking, and I keep checking the time on my phone. At exactly 3:30, Elaine walks across the grass toward my bench. She looks different in daylight, older maybe, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup can't quite hide. She sits down on the far end of the bench, keeping space between us like she's worried I might grab her. I start to say something, but she's looking past me, staring at something over my shoulder. Her face goes pale and she stands up fast, almost knocking her purse off the bench. She walks away quickly without saying a word, cutting across the lawn toward the parking lot. I turn around and see an unmarked sedan pulling into the lot, the kind that screams police even without lights. I pull out my phone and start typing everything she said during our last conversation, every detail I can remember about her claiming loneliness and debt. I type for 5 solid minutes, recording her exact words about staging the memorial as some kind of social experiment, her refusal to call it a con. My hands shake while I type, but I keep going because I know memory fades and changes, and I need this documented while it's fresh. Detective Donnelly calls me 20 minutes later, and I can hear the frustration in her voice. She tells me Elaine was gone before the officers could get close enough to approach her. She's not yelling, but she's firm when she says I can't do solo meetings anymore. I'm both a victim and a witness, she explains, and that means I need to follow protocols. I want to argue that I got her to show up, that I almost had her talking, but I know she's right. She's trying to protect the case and keep me safe even if I don't like being told what to do. She asks me to send her the notes I typed, and I do it right there on the call, forwarding everything to her email. The subpoena for the restaurant's security footage comes through about a week later. Detective Donnelly calls me to review what they found, and I drive down to the station to watch the recordings on her computer. The footage shows Elaine and Reese meeting at that same back table at least 6 times over 2 months. They lean close and pass envelopes back and forth, and in one clip, Reese slides what looks like a stack of photos across the table. But there's more. The footage also shows Elaine sitting with other people I don't recognize, different men and women who look sad or emotional during their conversations with her. Detective Donnelly pauses the video on one frame, showing a middle-aged guy wiping his eyes while Elaine holds his hand across the table. She tells me these could be additional victims, and the prosecutor wants to identify them. Kaylee provides receipts showing Elaine's payment pattern, always cash, always on Thursday evenings, going back almost 6 months. She also gives a statement saying she noticed Elaine meeting with different people each month, but thought it was just someone with a lot of friends going through hard times. A warrant for Reese's P.O. box gets executed, and the contents make everything click into place. There are sympathy cards from people I've never heard of, cards addressed to names that don't match Elaine. Small amounts of cash are tucked inside some of them, $20 here, $50 there, with handwritten notes about being sorry for their loss. There are unused gift cards from major retailers, still in their packaging and donation receipts made out to fake charity names. Detective Donnelly spreads everything out on a table and takes photos of each item. She explains that this wasn't just about my $200, or even about the handful of people paid to attend services. This was a larger operation targeting people's grief and sympathy, collecting small amounts from multiple sources that added up over time. The scope becomes clear when she counts up the cards and receipts, estimating at least 15 different memorial services over the past year. Reese gets brought in for questioning 2 days later, and I watch from the observation room while Detective Donnelly and another investigator talk to her. Reese sits there calm and professional, dressed like she's heading to a business meeting. She claims she's just an event coordinator who helps people plan memorial services and celebrations of life. She acts shocked when they mention the fake deaths and says she had no idea Elaine was deceiving anyone. She insists she was just providing a legitimate service, booking venues and printing programs for clients who paid her fee. Her lawyer, a sharp woman in a gray suit, blocks most of the important questions. Every time Detective Donnelly asks about specific payments or Elaine's claims about terminal illness, the lawyer cuts in and says her client can't comment on information provided by third parties. After 40 minutes, they have to let her go, though Detective Donnelly tells me they're building a case, and this was just the first interview. Elaine seems to vanish after our park meeting. I drive past the restaurant on Thursday evening and she's not there. Kaylee texts me that she hasn't seen her in 2 weeks. I check the coffee shop where I first spotted them together and it's empty. Her usual places go quiet like she knows we're watching. Then one morning about 3 weeks after the park, I find a handwritten note slipped under my apartment door. The paper is nice quality, cream-colored with no lines, and the handwriting is Elaine's. I recognize it from the photo album captions she showed me. The note says she's sorry, that she never wanted to hurt me specifically, that she knows what she did was wrong. She doesn't ask for forgiveness and doesn't make excuses. She just says she's sorry and signs it with her first name. I hold the note for a long time, reading it over and over, trying to figure out if it's genuine or just another manipulation. I sit at my kitchen table with the note in front of me, and I realize something important. What I really want isn't revenge. I don't even want to see Elaine punished harshly with maximum jail time or huge fines. What I want is to make sure she can't do this to other people. I want other lonely people to be protected from this kind of thing, from having their compassion and grief exploited for money. I want the people who sent those sympathy cards and cash to know they were scammed, so they can be more careful next time. I call Detective Donnelly and tell her this, and she's quiet for a moment before saying, "That's actually really mature." She tells me the best way to protect others is to cooperate fully with the prosecution and let the legal system work. I agree, and I hand over the note as evidence. Detective Donnelly calls me a few days later with a plan. She wants to arrange a controlled meeting using the phone number Elaine used to text me. The conditions are clear, and she goes over them twice to make sure I understand. Public location with lots of witnesses, plainclothes officers nearby, and I stick to the exact script we practice. I'm supposed to get her talking about the memorial services and the other people she targeted. I'm not supposed to accuse her directly or make her defensive. Detective Donnelly and I spend an hour going over different scenarios and responses. She texts from my phone asking if we can meet and talk, and Elaine responds within minutes saying okay. We set it up for a diner across town, neutral territory where neither of us has history. The morning of the meeting I show up 30 minutes early, and the diner is busy with the breakfast crowd. I pick a booth near the middle where I can see both exits. 2 officers are sitting at the counter dressed like regular customers, and Detective Donnelly is in a car outside watching the entrance. Elaine walks in exactly on time and slides into the booth across from me. She looks tired and scared, nothing like the confident woman from the restaurant. She starts apologizing right away, saying she's done this before with other people, that she's been running this scheme for over a year. She's crying and the tears look real, running down her cheeks and dripping onto the table. She says she'll pay everyone back, that she just wanted to feel important to someone, that being mourned made her feel valued in a way real life never did. I'm listening and trying to remember the script when I see movement behind her. Detective Donnelly and 2 officers in uniform walk up to our booth. Elaine sees my eyes shift and she turns around. Her face just crumbles when she realizes what's happening. One officer asks her to stand up and she does, moving slow like she's in a dream. They tell her she's being detained for questioning regarding multiple fraud complaints, and she doesn't resist. She just looks at me one more time with this broken expression before they walk her out. After they take Elaine to the station for processing, I drive home and I completely fall apart. The rush from the meeting wears off and I'm left sitting on my couch feeling exhausted and empty. I thought I'd feel satisfied or victorious, but instead I just feel sad and confused. I cry for about an hour, not pretty crying, but the ugly kind that leaves you with a headache. I think about how she manipulated me, but also about how lonely she must have been to do something this extreme. I think about dancing to that song in her apartment, and how real it felt at the time. Eventually, I pull myself together enough to look up therapists in my area. I schedule an appointment for the following week because I know I need help processing all of this. I also decide I'm going to be way more careful about the odd jobs I take from Craigslist going forward. Maybe stick to furniture moving and yard work instead of anything involving people's emotions or life stories. Over the next few weeks, I meet with someone from the prosecutor's office 3 different times to work on my victim impact statement. We sit in a small conference room with bad lighting, and I go through everything again, but this time focusing on how the whole scheme took advantage of people wanting to help someone dying. I tell her I want money back not just for me, but for all the other people who sent cards or small donations, thinking they were supporting a grieving friend. She takes notes and asks me specific questions about the timeline and the fake medical claims. I spend hours going over bank statements and text messages, matching dates and payments to build a clear picture of the fraud. The prosecutor explains that strong victim statements help show the real harm caused beyond just the dollar amounts. I write and rewrite my statement probably 6 times, trying to get the tone right so it sounds serious but not angry or mean. The case drags on for months after that initial meeting. The prosecutor calls every few weeks to update me on plea negotiations. Elaine's lawyer tries to argue she has mental health issues that explain her behavior, which makes me mad because plenty of people struggle without running elaborate cons. Eventually, both sides reach an agreement where Elaine pleads guilty to multiple counts of theft by deception and fraud. Reese pleads guilty to being an accessory and helping coordinate the fake memorial services. The plea deal includes a payment plan for giving money back to victims and probation with required community service focused on mental health support programs. I'm relieved we won't have to go through a full trial because I don't think I could handle sitting through weeks of testimony and cross-examination. The sentencing hearing happens on a cold morning in late fall, and I show up in the same suit I wore to Elaine's fake funeral. The courtroom is smaller than I expected with wood paneling and fluorescent lights that buzz slightly. When my turn comes to give my statement, I walk up to the microphone and my hands shake a little as I unfold my papers. I talk about how the fake friendship and manufactured grief affected me, how it made me question my ability to trust people and read situations. I explain that I'm not here asking for harsh punishment or revenge, but I want accountability for what happened, and I want to prevent this from happening to other people. I mention the other victims who sent sympathy cards and small donations, people who were manipulated into mourning someone who wasn't dead. My voice stays steady the whole time and I don't cry even though part of me wants to. When I finish and sit back down, I feel drained but also relieved that I said what I needed to say. After the judge finishes with sentencing, Elaine gets 3 years probation and has to pay back everything she took plus penalties. As people start leaving the courtroom, a man in an expensive suit approaches me in the hallway. He introduces himself as Elaine's lawyer and says she wants to talk to me privately if I'm willing. I look at him for a second and then shake my head. I tell him I need to focus on my own healing now, and I've already said everything I needed to say in court. Setting that boundary feels important, and I walk away without looking back. A few weeks later, I decide to go back to the restaurant where I first spotted Elaine. I park in the same lot and walk through the front door, my heart beating faster than normal. Kaylee is working the host stand, and when she sees me, she gives a small nod like she remembers everything that happened. I order lunch and sit at a table by the window, eating slowly and watching people walk by outside. The food tastes normal, and the restaurant feels like just a restaurant again, not some crime scene or place of betrayal. I'm proving to myself that I can move forward with regular moments and not let what happened ruin every place we went together. My phone rings while I'm finishing my sandwich, and it's Detective Donnelly calling with an update. She tells me they recovered partial money from Reese's bank accounts, and it's being split up among all the victims based on how much each person lost. She also says she notified other police departments about the scheme in case similar cases show up in different cities. The local case is officially closed now, and she thanks me for my cooperation throughout the investigation. I thank her back for taking the whole thing seriously and not treating me like I was stupid for falling for it. That weekend, I meet Elias for coffee at a place neither of us has been to before. We talk about what to do with the original $200 deposits we each got from Elaine at the start. We both still have the money because it felt wrong to spend it after finding out the truth. Elias suggests we donate it to a real cancer charity, something that actually helps people fighting terminal illness instead of someone pretending to be sick. I agree immediately because it feels like a way to take something bad and turn it into something that might help someone. We look up local charities on our phones right there in the coffee shop and pick one that supports families dealing with pancreatic cancer specifically. Back at my apartment, I start going through everything from my time with Elaine, deciding what to keep and what to throw away or delete. I delete most of the photos from my phone, but I save a few of them. Not because I miss her or want to remember the fake friendship, but because I want reminders that my ability to care about people is actually a strength, even when someone takes advantage of it. I keep one photo of us at a concert and another one from a restaurant, just as proof to myself that I was willing to show up for someone I thought was dying alone. A few days later, I get a call from someone at the community center downtown, asking if I'd be interested in a part-time position speaking to groups about scam awareness and emotional manipulation. Apparently, Detective Donnelly recommended me after seeing how I handled everything. I think about it for maybe 10 seconds before saying yes, because my experience might help other people spot warning signs before they get in too deep. Turning the pain into something useful gives me a sense of purpose that I haven't felt in months. Alan from the funeral home calls me one evening to tell me they've completely updated their policies for memorial services. They now require way more paperwork and verification before they'll host any event, and they've trained all their staff to watch for potential fraud. He thanks me for pushing the issue and says the changes will help protect other families and prevent the funeral home from being used for scams. I tell him I appreciate the call, and I'm glad something good came out of the whole mess. A few weeks later, a thin envelope shows up in my mailbox with the county seal printed in the corner. I open it right there in the hallway and pull out a check for $370, my portion of the recovered money from Reese's accounts. I stand there looking at the amount and thinking about all the things I could buy with it. But then I remember sitting in my therapist's office last week, talking about how hard it still is to trust people sometimes. I fold the check back into the envelope and walk upstairs to call the therapist's office and ask how many additional sessions $370 will cover. The receptionist puts me on hold for a minute, then comes back and says it's enough for about 6 more appointments if I keep the same weekly schedule. I book all 6 sessions right there on the phone because taking care of my mental health feels more important than buying anything else right now. That evening, I sit down at my kitchen table with my laptop and open a blank document. I've been thinking about writing this whole thing out for weeks, but I kept putting it off because I wasn't sure what I wanted to say or if anyone would even care. But then I realized I'm not writing it for sympathy or attention. I'm writing it as a warning for other people who might see similar ads on Craigslist or get approached with unusual requests that seem harmless at first. I start typing out the story from the beginning, keeping it factual and clear without making myself sound like a victim or making Elaine sound like a monster. I focus on the red flags I missed, like how she never showed me any medical records or how the lawyer never gave a callback number. I write about the lessons I learned about protecting myself while still being willing to care about people, about how compassion doesn't have to mean being stupid or careless. The post ends up being longer than I expected, almost 2,000 words by the time I finish and save it as a draft. I'll probably edit it down before posting it anywhere, but just getting it all written out feels good. Like I'm turning something painful into something that might actually help someone else avoid the same mistake. One evening about a week later, I'm walking through the park near where Elaine's apartment building used to be, the one with the courtyard where we danced to that song. I pause for a moment near the bench where we sat and talked about her bucket list, remembering how real it all felt at the time. How convinced I was that she was dying and needed a friend. The memory doesn't hurt as much as it used to, but it's still there, still complicated. I stand there for maybe 30 seconds just looking at the empty courtyard. Then I turn and keep walking toward home. The experience changed me in ways I'm still figuring out, but it doesn't define me and I'm okay with that complicated truth. And that's the wrap-up for today. I always try to tuck something useful inside these stories, even if it's small. Hopefully one line or moment stuck with you. Subscribe so you're ready for the next one.